Hello, in this video we'll see what are the measures of government deficit. We have already seen the components of government budget: capital receipts, capital expenditures, revenue receipts and revenue expenditures. When there is excess of total estimated expenditure over total estimated revenue, it is called deficit, budgetary deficit. With reference to budget of Indian government, budgetary deficit can be of three types. One is revenue deficit, the next fiscal deficit and primary deficit. Revenue deficit, revenue expenditure minus revenue receipts. So the difference between revenue expenditure and revenue receipts is revenue deficit. When there is excess of revenue expenditure over revenue receipts, there is a revenue deficit. So what are the implications of revenue deficit? There will not be saving. The government is dissaving, using the savings of other sectors of the economy to finance its consumption expenditure. Inability of the government to meet its regular and recurring expenditure in the proposed budget. And it borrows money, or there will be disinvestment. So there will be increase in the liability in the form of borrowing and reduces the assets through disinvestment. And there will be inflationary situation. Higher borrowings increase the burden in terms of loan amount and interest payments. What measures can be taken to handle this situation? Revenue to be increased. Government should take serious steps to reduce the expenditure and increase the revenue. The expenditure on unproductive areas to be reduced. Government should increase its receipts from various sources of tax and non-tax revenue. The next one, fiscal deficit. Total expenditure minus total receipts excluding borrowings. When there is excess of total expenditure over total receipts excluding borrowings during the given fiscal year is called fiscal deficit. The implications of fiscal deficit: government get into debt trap because borrowing becomes more. It doesn't involve only the repayment of principal amount but also the payment of interest. So interest payments increase the revenue expenditure, which lead to revenue deficit. So as a result, the country is caught in a debt trap. When government borrows from Reserve Bank of India to meet its fiscal deficits, RBI is forced to issue new currency notes to meet the deficit requirements. So there will be some more money supply in the economy and creates inflationary pressure. Then dependence on foreign countries. Government borrows from rest of the world and raises its dependence on the other countries. So these borrowings hampers the future growth of the country. It adversely affects the growth and development prospects of the country. The next one, primary deficit. But what measures can be taken to handle fiscal deficit? again borrowings and deficit financing, which we have seen for revenue deficit. The measures for revenue deficit are repeated during this time also to handle fiscal deficit. The next, primary deficit, fiscal deficit minus interest payments on the previous borrowing. So the primary deficit refers to the difference between fiscal deficit of current year and interest payments on the previous borrowings. The implications are interest payments have increased in recent years, so high interest payments on past borrowings have generally increased the fiscal deficit. So reduce the fiscal deficit, interest payments should be reduced through repayment of loans as early as possible. A low or zero primary deficit indicates that interest commitments on earlier loans have forced the government to borrow. So the interest payments make the government borrow again and again in larger scale. So that has to be reduced. The measure has to be taken to reduce the payment of interest.